you see an average teenager nowadays, right? They are in this silent pressure, of constantly wanting to be someone or fitting in. There are so many complex aspects that are coming out. There's peer pressure. Just the nuances of online subcultures we don't know of. So basically how teenagers are navigating through the digital landscape that as adults we may not even know of.
How can fathers incorporate a security that kids may not have from that father angle? And how can fathers be reassuring their kids depend on them for that validation?
I think it's the balance between providing support and helping them become independent.
Bullying is becoming more and more aggravated in schools, at home, in classes, at sports.
Lesson learned, right? Because they understand, oh, that's what you do when you're losing your anger.
Ms. Laskari is a counseling psychologist who has dedicated her career to supporting individuals across all age groups. Her journey in mental health began with a significant focus on young minds. She spent 5 years as a school psychologist in various leading institutions, honing her expertise in working with children and adolescents.
Welcome, Rashi. It was an absolute pleasure speaking with you the last time about love, marriage, and challenges in relationships. And today I've called you here to speak about teenage challenges and adolescence problems. What is your take on this phase of your life?
Firstly, congratulations on a very, very successful series with the show. I've been watching all these lovely conversations you're having with so many people around mental health and well-being, and I'm so happy to be back here. I'm also very, very interested in the topic you have selected because adolescence is a very fascinating yet turbulent phase, right? As all of us see it, they're standing at this bridge between childhood and adulthood, not knowing which side to lean on. So that phase and all the challenges that come with it is what makes this conversation even more important today. So adolescents, as we see it, are standing at this phase of life, right, where they're in this bridge between childhood and adulthood, not really knowing which side to lean. A part of them wants to belong to both sides. And most of these teenagers are going through multiple things, right? Which is why it makes it so much important to bring this into conversation for them, for the parents.
I do think particularly parents more than teenagers because it's a rebellious phase and they might be feeling what they're feeling, but I think it's harder for the parent to suddenly see that child rebelling, to see that child not listening, because you're so used to your 8-year-old listening to you go to bed, okay, that's your bedtime, please finish your dinner, okay, they finish their dinner, and suddenly at 11, 10, 12, nowadays much earlier than the actual teenage years, they get into that pre-teens, and I think it's a shock for the parents.
It's a shock for the parents. It's also very confusing for the one who's going through it, right? Like I said, they don't know where to belong. So in that process, they make mistakes, they make poor decisions. And there's so much that's going on, right? Earlier, we would say that this is a phase that is turbulent only because there's academic and social challenges. Now there's so much happening. I think the challenges are digital. I think they are emotional. And because of all of that, it's also deeply psychological.
Yeah.
And that's what we see, around us.
Absolutely. I think it is a lot more psychological than it used to be.
Yeah.
I think when you and I were teenagers, our main challenge was I'm not performing in school the way my parents want me to perform, or I'm not coming first, second, third in whatever format that they wanted me to come in. And maybe I'm not as popular as the other kids. These are the two main challenges. But today, their challenges vary from like, I don't know, my friends I don't have friends in school. I'm not performing in school. Some people have XYZ. I don't have it. I'm looked down upon.
It's
physically, and physically I don't appear as my friends appear.
Too much, right? It's too much access. They have too much of everything because they're too exposed. I'd give it to them. I think they're also very aware. So too much awareness, too much exposure is going to lead to too much overwhelm. But at the end of the day, they don't know how to handle that, right? So parents don't know how to handle it. And that's why I say that it's becoming very psychological also, the struggles that we see with adolescents.
Correct. So what do you think some of the most significant changes that you observed in teenage behavior and mental health in the last few years?
One, I think, is the awareness around mental health. And I'm going to say this, I know it sounds a bit counter to what we would like for it to be, but look at it like this, right? There is becoming this rise in self-diagnosis. which means that teenagers are now also somewhere trivializing real mental health issues, and that's a concern I see.
Yeah.
Very commonly, oh, I have this, oh, I'm like this, stereotyping themselves, labeling themselves, diagnosing themselves, either, like I said, because of exposure, because of digital media, whatever it may be. On the other hand, the silver lining of this is that as teenagers, they're a lot more open to therapy, right? Because of this exposure, they're a lot more open to talk about their feelings. So they're far more ready to address these things, but there is yet a trivializing of mental health issues that is happening. Another rise in the recent years would obviously be the pattern or the common occurrence of anxiety.
Yeah.
If you see an average teenager nowadays, right, they are in this silent pressure, of constantly wanting to be someone.
Or fitting in.
So either they have to prove themselves, they have to become someone, they have to get somewhere. There's this pressure constantly going on, and it's so much so that even 14 and 15-year-olds who are academically doing very well, socially very active, great at extracurriculars, are still feeling this exhaustion. Like,
Yeah.
it's almost like an achievement fatigue of sorts, right? They're doing all of that and they're still feeling a sense of burnout. And that's a concern because it's not letting them, really like be in the phase of life that they are supposed to be at.
Correct.
So there's a lot of rush, and whether we like it or we don't, so much overexposure is leading to their minds are constantly overwhelmed, their calendars are constantly full. As a result of that, I feel they don't know what real joys are because their joys are constantly linked to outcomes.
Yeah.
The ranks, the numbers, now the reels, the likes or the comments and
Yeah.
things like that. And if I go one step further, even the admissions, right? What college did I make it to? It's all linked to outcome.
Yeah.
And because of that, I feel like that's this, instilling this constant anxiety where I have to constantly do something to feel a certain way. If I'm not doing, I'm not enough.
Yeah, like the gratification process has become completely different to our time.
Yeah.
I would say a generation, 2 generations ago, you played a sport. You didn't necessarily have to come first, but if you played a sport, that was really great. Your parents were really happy you're a part of a basketball team. For example, it was like, wow, my kid plays in the basketball school team. Today, it's like, is she the main lead? Is she the captain? Does she go to different...
Is the team going places?
Yeah, that's why, is she traveling to different schools and playing tournaments? And if she is she coming first? And it's also the parents that are comparing and bringing this huge competition into play where the kids are prey to it. If your mother's going to criticize you 20 times a day, that is going to become your inner voice. So they are constantly saying, but what next? What are you doing?
And
I
this is
think
something-
unrealizingly, I'm not saying the
Yeah.
parents want to do this, but maybe the pressure they're building at home is leading to this as well.
See, a little bit of it I feel like is unavoidable, right? If that's what's happening around you. What I mean to say is that the busyness of it may be unavoidable. But then as parents, we have to set a system where we teach our children to also slow down.
Yeah.
Right? To do things for the experience of doing it.
Yeah, the meaning of it, the
And it
enjoyment
starts
of
from
it.
childhood, not teenage years, right? Showing them, teaching them how to be mindful, how to be slow, how to process, how to enjoy, emotionally breathe, right?
Yeah.
Where it's okay to do this just because you like doing it. You don't have to accomplish something with it, and you don't have to be in a pressure to prove yourself as worthy of because you're already worthy.
Yeah, not
for what
every
you're doing.
activity has to prove a point.
Yeah. So I feel like the anxiety has been on a rise, to answer your question. And in many ways, it's like you correctly said, it's ingrained, right? As a society, people are becoming like that.
Yeah.
And that's what, unfortunately, children are growing up watching.
Yeah, I don't know. I watched this show recently and had a huge impact of me. Have you heard of this show called Adolescence on Netflix?
Yeah. I watched it.
And it was, I have a 9-year-old son. So for me, it was really scary to see how they have depicted emotions of a 13-year-old in such a beautiful way to show challenges of a child's mind. And parents are unaware, right? So let's talk about the show a little bit. Tell me, first of all, what did you think of it?
Wonderful show, like you said. It's stirring so many conversations. For the benefit of viewers who haven't watched it, right? This is a show about a 13-year-old who gets arrested for the murder of a classmate. Now, just the plot and so much that happens around it. There are so many complex aspects that are coming out. There's
Yeah.
peer pressure. There's just the nuances of online subcultures we don't know of. There's so basically how teenagers are navigating through the digital landscape that
Yeah.
as adults we may not even know of, right? So much has come to light. And that's what I think of it, that it's not actually drama. I mean, if you come to think of it, Ashna, these are things that are real, right?
They are
They're part
happening.
of, they're things we see in therapy. We
Yeah.
see adolescents struggle, invisible struggles and invisible pressures of the teen culture, if I may put it like that, and they don't know how to deal with it, right? But they succumb to it in more ways than others. So I do feel like the show is very, very relevant. And just one part, I feel like, see, as a show, it's showing one side of adolescence, right? I can't take away from that, because while it is showing the darker side, I can't help but also remind myself of the fact that this is a phase for them that is also full of growth, right? There are friendships, there's creativity, there's exponential potential for growth. So there are also good things that happen in this phase. And as adults, while this is a show that is great as a conversation starter, it must be for mental health and everything else. I think as adults, as teachers, as educators, as therapists, we have to hold space for both those sides.
I
You know?
think, the conversation in this show, I think, was from the angle that we hear of so many suicides. We hear of so many school shootings around the world. We hear of stabbings from children to children. And I think it's more of a blame game. So the conversation, normally, the conclusion on the media or on news on wherever is, oh, this child, shot this class or stabbed this kid, and this child comes from this household, hence they did this. So I think the conversation that really moved me in this case, firstly, it was done in a way that is more like your understanding. It's not thrown in your face. It's more of your understanding of what the show is trying to tell you. It's your interpretation. So it leaves you to interpret it.
Yeah.
Firstly, that really resonated because it's actually allowing you to feel what you want to feel.
Yeah.
And secondly, it talks about the silent struggle. So they're not showing you the struggle of this child.
Yeah.
This child is shown in the beginning. He's crying and he's like a teenage kid, who's like, oh my God, I'm being accused of murder.
Yeah.
And he tells his parents, I haven't done it. And the parents obviously rightly believe, no, he hasn't done it. Look, he's very innocent. He's in his room. He's a quiet child. He doesn't get up to any nuisance or nonsense. Why
Yeah.
would he do this?
Yeah.
So it talks about the silence that we may experience with our children, but we don't question it.
Correct.
Which what resonated with me the most. Question the silences, because you have no
Yeah.
idea. I don't know if this is common, but I feel silence sometimes is more struggling than words. So if I tell my parents that, I'm struggling with weight, I'm so unhappy about how I've been feeling, I'm not feeling my best, compared to me completely stop eating, become anorexic, become obsessed with my looks. So there are two ways of handling it. So there are some people who say it and like find a way to get through whatever struggle it is. I'm giving a very small example.
Yeah.
And there are people who silently work on it and then mostly it's down spiral because it's not constructive. When you talk about it, you'll get two feedbacks that are constructive.
Yeah.
When it's silent, it is just you spiraling.
Yeah.
So probably that child was spiraling, had no
Correct.
way of connecting with anybody and didn't know how to address it. What aspect of the show really resonated with you? The one positive or negative aspect that really resonated with you, which you feel everybody should think about today?
So what resonated with me in terms of, see, as a therapist, what will stand out for me is what I see in practice, right? So what resonated with me there was the aspects of peer pressure, very rampant. And in continuity to that, the aspects of self-harm. Self-harm is not just physical, right? At so many other levels, right?
Yeah.
Not valuing yourself, just a lot of other choices you make, a lot of decisions you make. So these were two things that stood out for me. And also something that again, like you said, it's open to interpretation. Something that I took back was the parenting patterns. So if you notice, not just the father of the main character, but also other parents who were shown in a little absent capacity, right?
Correct.
And the disconnect that was out there again, very subtle, but it was there for one to notice that
Yeah.
why is this parent not in touch with the child, and whether the child is in trouble or not.
Correct.
That was a pattern that came up, that maybe this is again a common factor, which of course it is. We recognize that. So these were few things that stood out for me, resonated with me in terms of work. Yeah.
Do you think parents and educators today can take adolescence as a starting point for meaningful conversations with teenagers?
Absolutely. I mean, I think the show is a great conversation starter. In fact, if your child is 15 plus and you feel like he or she is ready to watch the show, it'll be a great idea to watch it together. Uh, Going through the experience of watching that together and stopping at points, so you're kind of witnessing what is happening together, and your conversations are also revolving around the sketch of the show.
Correct.
As a parent, you almost want to question your child, right? You have this urge to say, is this happening with you?
Yeah,
Is this happening
absolutely.
in your school? Are you hearing of these things? Worst thing to do, right? Because this show is opening up space for you to say, hey, what do you think of this character? What do you think Jamie could have done? Do you think something like that was happening to him or her? So the moment conversation is about the character, right? You're bringing the child into conversation with a perspective for them
Yeah.
to share what they think about it. And that's why I feel like this is a great conversation starter, where you're not bringing your anxiety into the talk to say, hey, I'm really worried what's happening with you. You're opening up yourself to tell your child that you can talk about these things, and you can have a different view. And as a parent, I can come in to say that, you know what, I feel like he or she could have done this differently. What do you think? Or, oh, have you heard of such stories? So you're not attacking the child. You're not towering over the child to say, tell me what's happening that I don't know of, because suddenly this show has brought to light that there's so much
Happening, yeah.
online, stuff that I don't know of. I don't know what
Correct.
emojis mean. I don't know. Suddenly, I don't know a lot of things.
I felt the same. I felt like I didn't know any of it. I
And-
actually Googled. I was like, oh my God, this exists, or does this show making it up? And I realized it exists.
And imagine a parent now suddenly panicking about not knowing these things, and then, hovering over the child. So see it as a conversation starter. See it as something that you're now able to talk about. You're now able to say that, hey, you know what, we can discuss these things. We can talk about it. You're talking about peer pressure. You're talking about mental health. How do you feel like that character felt? What do you think they could have done differently? What could have enabled them? What could have helped them? And that's where this should go now.
You know, in the show, I see Jamie, the boy, impacted very deeply by his father. And I think most kids have the mother as the nurturing factor and have the father as the role model. Not saying all, but this is my observation. And he talks about a little bit about how his father also had anger issues, and he keeps asking for validation from the father. He keeps asking the therapist, what does my father think of it? What did my father say in return? So I want to ask you, fathers are usually busy with work. Fathers spend little time at home in a day-to-day basis.
Yeah.
By the time they leave for school, most fathers would have left for office. And by the time they're back and they're kind of finished with their activities and getting ready for bed, that's when the fathers are back from work. How can fathers incorporate a security that kids may not have from that father angle? And how can fathers be reassuring where kids depend on them for that validation?
We're talking about fathers as role of fathers. Now, first for a moment, right? Let's look at fathers as men. A lot of men struggle with emotional expression themselves.
Yeah.
Which means that for them, the way of showing love is a lot of providing, a lot of, caretaking in different ways, not usually in expression. And this conversation that we were having was about him feeling very left out because he felt like his 14-year-old was very, very attached to the mother, and almost feeling like he was getting cornered by the team that was being built there, but he didn't know how to communicate. And we started with a small ritual where we said, okay, let's do a weekend coffee plan, right? Where we say that every weekend you let your child, now teenager, pick a place he or he in that case wants to go to for having a cup of coffee, and just father and son will step out.
Yeah.
There's no agenda, there's no life lessons being given, there's no lecturing, there is no
Correct.
questioning, there is just a open-ended time spent together. What is the duration? Half an hour, right? Okay, sure, like at least commit that much time.
Yeah.
And over just a matter of a month or something, right, that became a ritual they both started looking forward to. That became something that both started feeling, and it helped both in very different ways. This father who thought that he doesn't know how to emotionally express himself, who thought that, oh, he's not really good with words and doesn't know how to do these things because he's never done it, the wife's always filled in for all those things, was now finding those things about himself, was discovering that, oh, I can now have this chat and I can be honest with my son and I can talk to him about different things. And likewise for the son, a completely new experience, right? So coming back to your question, I understand that the busyness of life takes over. For both parents, we're talking about fathers right now, but it takes very little to actually take time out and invest in your child. And
Absolutely.
I call it investment because we make other investments, right? We invest money in the hope of like, okay, I'll invest a little bit in, funds that's going to multiply and like whatever. This is like you're investing bit by bit. You're investing 10 minutes every day in your child. That's going to multiply like multifold and come back to you as the child grows up in an extremely secure relationship.
Absolutely. Otherwise,
What
by
more?
Otherwise, by 18, they'll say my father was never really there. I spent most of the time with my mother, or my mother and father both weren't really there. My grandparents looked after me, and those are also scars that you can't easily erase.
And it doesn't matter if you're busy. It doesn't matter if you're running an empire. It doesn't take a lot to make your child feel that you're there for them, right? And even 5 minutes, 10 minutes of undivided attention, where I'm able to put my devices away, I'm able to put all other family members away, I'm able to put my thoughts away and have a conversation really to feel connected and really to make my child feel like I'm checking in with them on what is happening and letting them into, I think that makes a lot of difference. So yes.
I have this theory, and I've been looking into this theory quite a bit. So a mother becomes a mother the minute she's pregnant. She starts to think about two lives. And the father claims that he will only become a father when the child is born because he can't feel anything yet. Likewise, the girl gets engaged or starts seeing a boy, falls in love, decides this is my man for life. The husband or the man only thinks that the role comes in the day he's married the girl. It makes me question and answer the fact that men respond with time. They don't instantly start taking up roles, they get into the role. What I don't understand or don't agree with is most fathers think their role as a father is to provide, like you rightly said. I want to ask a question that if you take away the wife and if you take away the child, would you stop going to office at 9 a.m. and would you stop coming back at 5 p.m.? So that is work. That is not your marriage. That is not you being a father. That is just a job. A job is something everybody is doing in some form or the other. I don't know how most men think that is their job as a father. Look, I go every morning, I come back in the evening, I'm providing for you. The money, the house that you're living in is paid for by that job. The food that you're eating is paid for by that job. What more do you want me to do? That is a conversation in most homes unrealizingly. That's what men see their role as. But in the end, my question is, take away those things and tell me, would you still not be doing that job? If you are, then you're clearly doing nothing for the marriage and nothing for the child. Everything you do on top of that would be for the marriage and would be for the child.
You're not even doing anything for yourself. Let's also look at that. If you're working for yourself. That's why you should be working, because you like what you do. Right? If I'm going to work thinking that I'm going to work because I have to provide, I don't like what I do, then what do where's life headed for you from a work point of view also? Coming back to your observation of the trend, it's changing, right? It is changing. I'm not going to take away from that. But yes, traditionally that would be the thought pattern. And that's why I say that the ask of the change is not like, hey, stop working. Of course not, right?
Yeah.
It's not like sacrifice something, because now women are working at par with men, if not in the same capacities, in some capacity, right? They have similar hours. So it's not so much about just the providing of tangible, financial security. It's also the realization to provide emotional support. You may
Correct.
give all of this, but if you don't have a rock solid foundation of a relationship, what are you going to do with all of this? Right? Which is why I call that investment, right? I'm investing bit by bit, bit by bit. What am I investing? I'm investing time, energy, emotion. Why? Because I know that this is going to multiply and come back to me when the child grows up, when the child is 18, 20, when I am in my old age and the child is now a full grown adult. That's the solid relationship on which things will bloom.
Yeah.
So I'd like to believe that this is changing, but I do recognize that more and more conversations like this should bring that to people's awareness, right? Because what we are talking about is conditioning. I don't blame anybody. We've all grown up with, let's say, our parents do that, and
I agree.
We almost feel like it's our responsibility to do that. But to change that narrative and say, okay, that's not enough. That's not
my
it.
point. My point is that if the two generations before, your parents or your grandparents, had that conditioning, had that thought process, and you see that life worked out for them, great.
Yeah.
But today you're far more aware.
Yeah.
So why would you carry on the pattern? And not just that, you see your kids emotionally demand a lot more than we did. So when your kids are demanding, you cannot have the same answers the previous generation had.
Yeah.
Father's job is to work. Father's job is to earn. Father's job is to provide. That narrative worked 50 years ago. It doesn't work today. Your child is not going to take that as justification. Your child is going to say, and? You don't see movies with us.
Yeah.
You don't take me out on Sunday. You don't
And
come
so
for
is
football
the
practice.
case for what they are seeing of the fathers be there as partners. Why are we forgetting that? Right? I mean, this show spoke so much about, let's say, aggression, but just like subtle things, right? How I see a role model individual in my life conducting themselves in their relationships. The respect that is shown between people, between
Yeah.
partners, the respect with which, let's say, my parent is talking to their parent,
Yeah.
right? I'm absorbing, imbibing everything, and that's what I'm going to go back and emulate. That's what's going to feel like normal to me.
Yeah.
And that's why it is so important to be present, because if all my child is going to watch me do is get up and run the race of life, then that's what's normal to them, right? So I'm constantly anxious because I'm like, oh, like there's EMIs to pay and there's holidays to plan, and I'm always like onto the next thing, not
Yeah.
really here. Then all I'm doing as an adult around my teenager or my child is I'm firefighting life, and that's what they're thinking they have to do. So they start doing that in their capacity,
Yeah.
where they're like, oh, I had to get that college admission, or I have to be like super good at this also, super good at that also. No, you don't have to be, right? Nor do I have to be.
Yeah.
So understanding, the focus on quality of life, on slow living, on enjoying what you are doing, on not being in this rat race of sorts is going to start with the parent first.
I love what you said, quality of life. It's a word that is so loosely used, but I don't think people understand the meaning of it. If your child is doing 5 activities per day after school, you are clearly not providing quality.
Yeah.
That child is in class after class after class. I don't know which competition is in the parent's head.
Correct.
Because it's not going to lead anywhere.
Yeah.
In fact, it's going to lead to a burnout at the age of 15. 16, 18, and suddenly when that kid goes to college and that kid is like, oh my god, thank god my parents are not hovering over my head and I'm going to do nothing.
Yeah.
I'm going to lay in my dorm, sleep all day, attend 2 or 3 lessons, maximum or minimum that I need to get through this, and probably nothing more.
And that's exactly why first and second year grades suddenly zoom down, because they feel like they've got this new freedom. Where this pressure of schooling and everything that happened until then and too much happening now makes them go in the extreme opposite of I don't want to do anything.
I want to address a topic that has also been very prevalent lately, and I feel a lot of mothers are addressing it in conversation. I hear a lot of conversations based on gender change, or gender confusion. So a lot of 11, 12, 13-year-old nowadays talk about identity, and I don't think it was a conversation even a generation ago. We
Yeah.
did not even think about it.
Yeah.
I remember reaching college and meeting my first gender confused friend. And I remember wondering, what? How did I not know of this? And even if I knew of it in school, it was more like a joke. Like it didn't really mean anything.
Yeah.
But today it's serious. It's a serious thing happening at school. So tell me firstly, what is your view on gender confusion? Tell me at what age is it starting? And how are children addressing it amongst themselves?
Geography of school matters, one, right? I'm not sure if it is happening pan-India, can't say for tier 2 cities, but a lot more commonly in tier 1 cities. Now, exposure, media, digital media, a lot of conversations around these being normalized is making information reach children sooner, right? So starting from 11, 12 onwards is what I observe the pattern when they start talking about these things. Now, I'm not saying that as an individual, one is not allowed to recognize or become aware if they feel like they don't belong to a gender. But there's a time for it, right? And even if that happens, I feel like it's a process that's very personal.
Yeah.
That should take its own time to reflect, to realize, to come to an understanding of over over a span of your life, to be sure of something like that.
Yeah.
But when these things become common conversations in school, it's becoming a sort of peer influence, right? Where people are talking about it.
Yeah.
Oh, it's something new I don't know of. I'm curious. I'm intrigued. What if I am? Oh, what if I can be, then I can be part of this person. Oh, I like this friend. I can resonate with them, or I can relate to them, or I can belong to them if I start thinking like that.
Yeah, because now it's like communities, and then you can subscribe to that community.
Exactly. So that's where the issue is, right? I mean, it's perfectly okay if somebody feels a different way, and it's also okay to talk to your parents about it, or to take your time to review that feeling. But it's not okay to get influenced by this because it's happening around you. And that's where the confusions happen. Because once I get influenced, I start belonging to a community, then I have to start doing things that
The community
others
is
are
doing.
doing, right?
Yeah.
So, they're dressing a certain way, they are now in their teens, but they're dating same gender people. But I'm still confused internally. I'm just making it look like I'm so sure externally, right? So then it leads to so much conflict, so much internal conflict, that it becomes really exhausting for them to deal with, right? So that's what I feel of it, that I just feel like it's gender curiosity, and that's where it should be at until their early adulthood, right? Until their young adulthood, where they're able to be more sure about their feelings, more aware, more responsible for their thoughts. And until then, that's where I'd see it.
I also feel like it's almost like become like a popularity thing. So I have seen in one or two schools where it was cool to say certain things,
Yeah.
and then all the teenagers were saying it. Oh, it's cool to be gender curious. Oh, it's cool to be gender confused. It's cool to not have an identity. And if somebody had it, they're like, why do you have an identity? You're 13. What do you really know about your body? And then everybody's questioning themselves. Even when they don't need that confusion, they have it. And I saw that trend and I was like, how scary, because it was not a conversation we had.
Yeah.
And to suddenly see children in your child's school talking about it like it's the most common thing and it's the most entertaining topic. And you start to wonder, why is it even there? And if somebody's child is genuinely gender confused, the parents should take up that conversation with a specialist, with a therapist, not because that child has a problem, because they can address it in the right way. And if it really is, or even that person or that child is confused or influenced,
And they have correct guidance
yeah,
to review that feeling for themselves, and they're not influenced by other people who are their age, who also understand less. But to answer your question, see the pattern, right? You're saying in our time, we didn't have these conversations. We didn't have this exposure. In our time, maybe conversations are about something else. Oh, do you know that one's watching porn? Or do you know that
Yeah.
one tried smoking? Or do you what? So what is the commonality there, right? That age is of a lot of curiosity. And in that age of curiosity, there's going to be curiosity about something. Now, as times change and things become more and more normalized, that curiosity is shifting,
Yeah.
right? Now, as parents, you have to hold space for that curiosity, and you have to be okay to say, it's all right, I understand you're curious about it. I'll stick with you on that curiosity. We don't have to close on a decision. We don't have to belong to something as of yet. It's okay. It's okay for you to be intrigued. It's okay for you to have conversations. We don't have to freeze something in time.
Correct.
And that's what is important, right? Because parents feel very confused. They feel like, oh, what? We've never spoken about these things.
Yeah.
Well, how do I deal with this information coming my way? And then suddenly I have to also deal with, my children talking about things that I'm not okay with, right?
Comfortable with.
Not comfortable with. They're very sensitive topics.
Yeah.
So I think that's what there is to take back. That this is a phase of their life where they are going to be curious about one thing or the other. And that's what you have to understand. You cannot be shocked, panicky about, oh my God, what are they curious about? Because it's okay. They'll get past it, right? And that's how we see it.
You're right. Every generation has its own things to be curious about.
Yeah.
And even back then, it was a shock for the parents. So I remember when I was entering my teenage years, some classmates had tried smoking, and it was like, oh my God, like they've tried smoking, right?
Yeah.
And a year or two go by, and you're like, should I ask my parents? Is it normal? Never seen my father do it. Never seen my mother do it. Never seen anyone at home do it. Probably seen an ad or a movie somewhere where it's done,
Yeah.
and it's so cool at the time that
Yeah.
somebody in your class has tried it.
Yeah.
But at that time, your parents reacted the same way. What are you talking about smoking?
Yeah.
That's
Taboo.
something. Yeah, it's taboo. Like you wouldn't talk about it. And today it's become other topics. So
Yeah.
you're right. It is about what's not normal to talk about is the
Yeah.
curious part, and then somehow addressing it in some way or the other.
Yeah, because they're also challenging, like they're in this phase where they're trying to challenge their own thought process. They're developing individual opinions on things, right? And that's what is fueling this, right? So even if a parent says, hey, you should not talk about these things, or you should not, the moment you said you should not do it, they're like, oh, why can't I do it?
Yeah.
Right? Because they are in that phase where they just want to develop their own individual identity. Now, as a parent, to hold back my instant impulsive reaction and say you shouldn't be doing it, and to say that, oh, you know what, it's okay.
Yeah.
It's okay if your friends are talking about it. You don't have to do anything about it. It takes a lot of patience and internal work, right? And that's what gives the child this space to say, okay, I can come and speak to my mother about this. I can come and speak to my father about it. They're not overreacting. And that's what's important.
This also leads me to a very important topic, and a very, I think, time relevant. It's been relevant always, but I think it's becoming more and more obvious. Bullying. So, bullying used to be something that used to happen when you went to college. So, it was called college ragging. And you were 18 by then. So, you're obviously mature enough, or just that level of maturity, you could handle yourself, or you could handle basic emotions: sad, angry, not affected, whichever. But as a 13-year-old, I mean, what are really your strengths at that point emotionally? You're still so vulnerable.
Yeah.
And bullying is becoming more and more aggravated in schools, at home, in classes, at sports. And, there's a conversation I had with my child. My child is 9, and I had this conversation just a few weeks ago. And I said to him, he said, Mama, there's a lot of bullying at school, and it's very unpleasant. And he's quite, I would say, emotionally aware, even at his age, because we have a lot of open conversations. So I said to him, one way of looking at it is, you're getting bullied, or your friend is getting bullied. Why don't you look at the fact that the child who's bullying you is going through so much at home, or is going through unhappy relationships at home, or wherever he's coming from, that he's projecting all of that on you, or your friend who's getting bullied, because it is a reaction, right?
Yeah.
And he said, oh, I never saw it like that. I said, so next time somebody's bullying you, ask them. What are they going through? Why are they projecting all this negative emotion on you? Because it's very hard to see it like that, but I feel like that is the real truth. Can you shed some light on that?
Is learned behavior, right? It's not like I'm born with it.
No one is born with anything.
It's not like it's in my nature. I've learned it. Where have I learned it from? Maybe I've seen aggressive behavior at home. Maybe I've seen a pattern of dominance over empathy. Maybe I've seen an older sibling, or a cousin or somebody just casually tease, very harmless stuff. But when I see that at home and I feel like it's normalized, I feel like I should go back and exercise that control somewhere else where I can, because I can't do that back at home. So I can't be aggressive at home. I can't pull a joke on somebody at home, but I can do that in another environment. So I'll go try that at school, right? So that's one start point of bullying. Another one, of course, is that when these things are normalized in your friend circle, right? When they are encouraged, when they are validated. So when I feel like friends are, sometimes encouraging me and enabling me to say, oh, you said that to that person. And then it's like, oh, so somebody who's coming from a low self-esteem feels like, oh, I got attention for doing this. So I can do more of it because it's making, so it's kind of filling their sense of self. And these are some situations where I feel like bullying becomes very normalized. So when we recognize that those are the two ways where bullying could be part of it. There's a very, very common pattern there that the person who is actually the bully is also going through a lot internally, right? You're right about that. Maybe they're not getting attention at home.
Yeah.
Maybe they are loving this, attention that is coming from the peer group. Maybe they are just doing it because they want to belong to a certain group of people where they feel like, okay, that's what they do. So even if it is negative attention, they feel like that's fine.
Yeah.
As long as it's getting me to be spoken of. Once I used to work as a school psychologist years ago, and I was working with this child who was then grade 10, so like maybe 15 or something. And I was asked to speak to this child because they said, oh, he's been bullying kids in the bus, and you should talk to this child. And the expectation out of me was that I should, guide this child in a more strict way. And over our course of very patient work with this child, at one point he even broke down because his statement, and it still stands out with me, was that, oh, but at least it was having me being seen, right? Like at least in the bus it gave me a chance to be in authority. And that took now it's very difficult for a school to understand that. They're running a big institution, they have so many students. It's very difficult for them to be able to penetrate through one child's emotion to say, hey, you know what, don't yell at this child because there's a reason why this is happening. I understand it's not acceptable. So that's what it is, right? If I have to just put it in a simple example, that there's so much that they're going through, there's a reason why they're putting that out there.
Yeah.
Sometimes the reason is deeply emotional. Sometimes it is of belongingness. Sometimes it is just poor emotional regulation also, right? I don't know how to manage my emotions. I've never been taught the tools for it. So I felt angry. I got irritated with something that's happening in one place. So I just went and displaced it at somebody else. So a lot of these things lead to bullying nowadays. Yeah.
Emotional regulation, what you said, is something I think is one of my favorite things to discuss. Because emotional regulation not just doesn't happen in children, it doesn't even happen in adults. And people don't understand how deep rooted it is if you don't emotionally regulate yourself.
Yeah.
Because everything is then a projection. Everything is a reaction. There is no action. And then the blame is, I reacted in such a way because you said this to me. So if right now Rashi says, today your face is looking really strange, what have you done to it? One is you saying it because you genuinely feel I'm not looking like myself. One is you just trying to put me down to feel better about yourself, which is no emotional regulation. And I think it starts very young and then it carries on if not corrected. And then it carries on to the point where it's toxic and you don't realize you're a toxic person. And you blame everybody else for being who you are. You blame everybody else for becoming who you've become.
Yeah.
And you're just bitter. So I would encourage parents, and I'm sure that's what you do, encourage parents emotional regulation at a very young age. It really becomes the setting stone, and it really doesn't change after a certain age, because that's what becomes a way of being. And they feel like they don't need to emotionally regulate, and I see that so commonly in adults my age. I see that so much, and I don't say anything because it's not my place, but I observe and I feel like, my goodness, that child or that person or that adult was not taught emotional regulation.
How will it be taught? Conversations stirred around it. Again, parents to find time
Yeah.
to sit down with their child and talk about what the child is feeling, observing, noticing around them, right? It's very easy to brush off because I'm having a busy day. My child comes back home and says, oh, I went down to play, this one bashed up that one, and da, da, da. My response is going to be, yeah, okay, come on, have your dinner, go to bed.
Yeah.
Right? Or I could sit down to say, oh, tell me what happened. Why do you think he or she did it? How do you think that one felt?
How do you feel about it?
How do you feel about
What if it
it?
happened to you?
Do you
Yeah.
think he or she could have been doing something differently? You're hand holding the child through empathy. You're not just one day getting up and saying, be kind to people. You're telling them, showing them, going through it with them on how to be kind to people, how to understand situations. That's how you help a child process emotions. They are not going to know how to do it on their own. You're going to have to do it with them. And second, do it yourself, right? When a child sees that, okay,
Yeah.
my mother's having or my father's having an angry outburst, but they're processing their emotions, they're asking for time out, they're not blaming the other person to say, you are making me angry. They're seeing that, okay, the parents are able to say, hey, I'm not in the right mood right now, give me 10 minutes, I'm going to calm down and come back and talk to you. Lesson learned, right? Because they understand, oh, that's what you do when you're losing your anger. And that's, so two things, right,
Yeah.
that parents have to do. The child is not going to learn emotional regulation. I have a 5-year-old, he one day came back and told me, today I learned in school about empathy. And I was surprised. I was like, what? I mean, I was very impressed, but I was like, what is school teaching a 5-year-old about empathy? But then what I realized after that is school is only going to do that much, right? They'll introduce a topic. The remaining leg of the work is for us to do as parents, for us to now pick up this topic and keep coming back to say, hey, did you notice that? That's a way of showing empathy.
Yeah.
Oh, did you said thank you to the staff when they left home. That's a way of showing empathy. So that's how they're going to understand the concept of the word, right? So similar to that, I mean, this is 5, when they're 8, when they're 10, resilience, tolerance. There are so many things that they need to understand, which only when, as a parent, you get involved in helping them understand,
Yeah.
are they going to become better at regulating their emotions as teenagers. And that's very important. And this entire journey will create such a safe space for your child that you're not going to have those struggles when they're in their teenage, when they're in their adulthood. They know they can always bounce back to this person,
Exactly, yeah.
because we've had these conversations and this is very normal to do.
Yeah.
And that's where the change happens.
Yeah, that's the point, right? Normalize mental health not because it's cool. Don't talk about therapy because it's okay, everyone's doing it, you should do it too. Normalize it in such a way that they understand the actual meaning of it. It's not just phrases and words that they use,
Yeah.
because it's also becoming that. I know I went to therapy, I know everyone's doing it. It's also becoming like that fad thing. So I think it's very important to make them understand what does it really mean and why are you doing it. One is you want to do it and everyone's doing it. Where is the why? Why are you doing it? Question it with them, and they should be questioning it. Why are we doing it as a family, or why are we doing it as kids, and why are my parents doing it as adults? And I think that brings in a lot of reasoning, and the minute there's reasoning, there's more understanding.
Yeah.
Nobody understands concepts for the sake of understanding a concept. You have to really reason it out with life examples. And you're very right. If you don't follow it, they're not going to follow it. Because they ape you more than you realize.
Yeah. So it's like you're guiding them into it without forcing them to do it, right? You're not forcing your child to say, you must do this. You're just like leading them in that direction very, very gently. And that's why it is a constant effort. It's a constant work. You can't get up one day and be like, oh, I haven't been emotionally invested with my child all of their growing up years.
Let's do it today.
Let's now, teenage, right? Now let me start. I always say this, and I'm very clear about this, that how emotionally invested you are with your child from in one phase impacts the next phase, right? So how you're able to be with your child between 3 to 5, 3 to 6 is going to have an impact on the child's behavior between 6 to 9, right? How they are with you, how much they share about school, how much, because they're coming from that. And how invested you are in that 6 to 9 phase is going to have an impact on the next phase. Because if you're absent, and it happens very easily, Ashna, because you feel like at 6, my child has now become independent, is going to school for like 6-7 hours, they're on their own, they can figure this out. And very commonly I see parents say, oh, you had a fight with someone, figure it out yourself, right? Are you old enough to do it? Sure, I understand you want your child to be independent and sorting their own arguments, but you don't leave it completely to a point where you say, you'll figure it out, right? You still have to be on the fence to say, can I help you sort this? Is there something you'd like to talk about? Because that investedness is going to keep that foundation going, right? Where the child always bounces back from that foundation to go on to other things that they want to do. So every phase is important in its own way to remain invested emotionally with the child, to remain attuned.
What are the biggest challenges parents face today raising teenagers in this complex world?
So many, right? Uh, the one that stands out for me is a fear of kind of becoming irrelevant to the child's life. See, parents of teenagers today are very, very different. Like they've lived a very different teenage than their children now are living, right? So, teenagers today are uh, emotionally very fluent, they are digitally very native, they are very influenced by the online world, sometimes even more than their own family dynamics. And these parents of these teenagers grew up in starkly opposite
Correct.
situations, right? They were, a lot of them even now are not emotionally that fluent. They are not digitally native. They're not aware of the online influences. So there's this pressure of feeling like, am I losing out? Am I getting irrelevant to my child's life? Now, out of that pressure of feeling the disconnect, because they're very distantly far away from the child, they tend to swing either way, right? Either they go the extreme of hovering over the child because they feel like too much involvement, too much intrusiveness will help me have full view, and that leads to an over controlling pattern. Or they swing the other direction where they say, I'll just step back because I fear overstepping into my child's life, so I'll just go that way. So I feel like that's the biggest issue they face, right? This fear that I may
Yeah.
get irrelevant. But striking that balance is very important, right? Where you can remain involved, uh, be updated, be part of your child's life, but not in an intrusive way.
Correct.
You don't have to know because you should know.
Yeah.
Just as much as creating that space for your child to share, for you to be there for them, is what is more important. So that balance is important.
There's a concept of teenagers needing space and privacy nowadays. So I hear a lot of mothers, caretakers, providers say, nowadays kids need their space. You can't ask them everything. You can't be those hovering parents. They stop talking to you. They stop telling you. So it's better to give them their space and time. Whenever they're ready, they'll talk to us. How do you feel about this? Do you think we really need to give them that space, or there has to be a balance between space and being open?
So taking space, you ask me, is it normal? It's not normal, Ashna. It's essential. Okay, let's look at it like that now. When we are talking about teenagers, we spoke so much about their curiosity. They are at a phase of their life where they are developing their identity. They are shaping themselves from childhood to like adulthood. They are discovering a lot of things about themselves. They are discovering their own independent thought. They want to experiment with making small to moderate decisions of their own. So it's okay for them to take the space. But this has to be an understanding between the parent and the child. It's almost like a give and take, right? Where as a parent, I'm going to be able to give freedom in exchange of responsibility.
Yeah.
Right? So it's like a give and take, and that's the mutual understanding where you're having your space, and that's fine. But in response to that space, there is an accountability that is also needed from the child. Accountability, responsible behavior, for responsiveness, that you keep communication open. And it's okay for a parent to say that, hey, you can have your space, but I will step in when I think there is something that needs my attention. So you're always on the fence, right? You're not giving them space, like you said, that, oh, you'll come to me when you need to. Of course, I'm giving you that, right? That I'm available for conversations. But I'm also setting a boundary there to say that I'm watching.
Yeah.
Right? I'm not intrusive. I'm not looking into your devices, or I'm not looking into your phones, or I'm not looking into your room or your life. But I'm on the fence that when you need something, or even when I feel like something's off, I will step in.
address it, yeah.
So my need to be a cool parent is one part, but it's also my responsibility to protect and provide for you. So when that comes over, then that will take over, right? If the situation requires for me to protect and provide for you, then that'll come over me being a cool parent. And that balance is important. So yeah, I wouldn't say that you can get away with like no space. It's very important for their growth.
But I feel like nowadays parents are exposing their children to environments that are not appropriate for their age. How do you feel about that?
So, parenting is evolving, and a lot of things parents do today are in response to the evolution of the children, right? Is also in response to evolution of their own lives, because a lot of things that we do as adults in, let's say, our 30s or in our 40s are things our parents did not do in their 30s or
Correct.
40s. But we can't miss out on the fact that the child is still very vulnerable, very impressionable. So there has to be a balance between maintaining that with the child. Your role as a parent is still always going to be that of a role model to the child, and the child is always looking up to you for literally everything
Correct.
you do, as much as from the way you think to the choices you make, to your lifestyle choices, everything is being imbibed. So it's very natural for a child, and I'm going to say this in a healthy way, to see their parent, let's say, go to the gym every day and think that this is normal behavior. You work out every day.
Yeah.
Right?
It's so important to be fit and
It's so
healthy.
important to be fit and healthy. Versus to see, for a child to say their parent do something else every day, needless for me to highlight what, anything, and go like, oh, this is what you do. Every weekend you do this. Every day you do this. And that's where, for them, things start becoming normalized. So responsibility as a parent is tougher now, right? Because you want to lead your own lifestyle, which your parents did not have. So now you're kind of managing that along with managing being the right representation to your child.
Correct.
So be a friend, be there, because your child needs that, right? They need that space to share and to talk, because if they don't have that space with you, they will find it otherwise. But also be careful about what you're exposing your child to. You don't need to take your child into environments that are not conducive for them before time. They don't need to be talking about things that are not age appropriate, just because it's okay. It's okay if the child knows these terms. It's okay if the child knows these brands, but the child doesn't need to know them at 5 and 8. It's not required.
It's irrelevant at that
It's
age.
irrelevant at that age. So it's very important to be careful about that, because today you can control that. Now, where this goes from here, you will not be able to control, right? So the initial information provided to the child at that age, 3 years from now, what the child is going to do with that information is outside of your control.
Correct.
So it's better to be careful with that in the beginning than to feel like you have to deal with something else later.
I also see social media playing a huge role. As we all talk about it, it is a conversation that is happening in the world. But as much as we'd like to change it, there's nothing we can do about it. We can't shut it out.
Yeah.
It is there. Just like our parents couldn't shut out things that were there for us and it wasn't there for them. Same way, we can't shut out media, exposure, social media, television, whatever it is there. We can't shut it out completely.
Yeah.
I guess we have to find a balance. Can you elaborate a little bit on how does social media lead to issues like body image issues, self-esteem issues, bullying? And I just think comparison between teenagers.
Social media affects them in the same way as it affects adults, possibly 2x, right? Because when you're on social media, you're in this chamber of like these, like almost like a mirror chamber where you're just constantly looking at so many things and trying to see a reflection of yourself in everything that you see. And you're right, comparison is now not with my classmate. Comparison is with this perfectly curated version of people's life online, which is like unlimited. So that obviously is having an issue on body image. You won't believe, I had a client once who was 16, and she would delete a post if it did not get 100 likes in 1 hour.
In
She would
1
delete
hour?
it. Yes, she would delete it. Why? Because for her, her idea of her sense was only based on how many people liked it. So they get stuck in the cycle, right, of validation from others and self-critique. And that kind of loop keeps going on. It's so difficult to kind of step out of it. And that's where minimal exposure, right? How much access do they have to these things? What is their understanding of, the material that is there? How objectively are they able to view where it is coming from, who is posting it, what is the intention of it, how is it helping me, what does it make me feel? These conversations will help them like be a bit more objective about it and not apply their lives or not apply themselves to everything. So the previous generation struggled with access, right? Where they didn't have access to a lot of these things. I feel like the current generation struggles with excess. There's too much. There's too much exposure, too much information, and too little grounding, right? There's too little, the tools to kind of process this information is not there. So while one may argue that social media is inevitable and things like that, well, I may not agree, but okay, if your child is on social media and if that's a choice you have made as a parent, then it's your responsibility to also guide them with
And
the
regulate
right
it.
tools and regulate it
Yeah.
and have a system of co-viewing the content so you know what your child is watching, to talk about it, to discuss it, because that's where critical thinking comes in, right? Where the child is able to say, this is why this is out there and what do I do with this? Do I watch it, not watch it? Is it good for me, not good for me? And at least facilitate that process, right? That's what I think.
I read a very interesting story a few days ago, written by a mother. And she said that, as much as we think we ban things and as much as we think we have control, we don't even realize what our kids are doing. So her 12-year-old at the time had downloaded Instagram, and apparently you can hide it under another app, so it's invisible on the home screen. So it doesn't show that she has Instagram. It is hidden behind some news app or whatever. And so the 12-year-old's, the rest of the interview was by the 12-year-old, who's now 15, and said that she was somebody who really was interested in recipes. So she talks about how she loved cooking with her mother, and she was a healthy 12-year-old, and all her friends use Instagram, so she decided to use it for Instagram as well for recipes. And she downloaded it, but knew mother didn't agree with it, so hid the app. And her search was for recipes and food. Little did she know that it transferred into people eating certain foods to look a certain way, because your algorithm keeps changing and Instagram obviously promotes and whatever, like it just happens. That's the way social media works.
Yeah.
And she'll end up seeing a million posts on weight loss and started to question her own looks. And she writes that she's 13 and a half by this time and it's summer vacation, and she's doing this a lot in her room and door closed. And instead of looking at recipes, she started looking at foods to create weight loss, foods to create to jawline, foods to look a certain way. You're 13 and a half. Your body is not even developed yet. But obviously there's no understanding. As we know, teenagers are vulnerable. 15, she reaches the hospital because her organs stop working. There's not enough food, there's not enough fuel in her body. And that's when she tells her mother, I'm so sorry for the last 3 years. This is what has happened using social media in the wrong way.
Yeah.
I just feel like, I'm not saying don't use Instagram. I use it. I know we all use it. I am saying educate them to use it in a way where it can be useful. It can be a tool. Don't use it to diminish yourself.
Ashna, I'm glad you bring this up. I'd say this about social media. I'd say this about smartphones also. You have a 9-year-old. Would you, in the future, send your child out with your car key saying go drive if he doesn't know how to drive?
No.
You'll give him lessons. You're definitely not putting him on the highway to say go without lessons, go drive. Then why am I putting my child in the digital world without digital literacy? Firstly, a child until the age of 15, 14, 15 does not need a smartphone.
Yeah.
There's no need. As a parent, you feel like your child needs to keep in touch. Sure, there are other ways to do it. There are other phones to do it. You feel like your child needs to stay in touch with their peer group. There are schools, right? Most schools, most international schools today have tabs. Tabs have chat windows open with classmates. So they are doing that already. Smartphones open the pathway to social media. And there is no need for a 15 or 16-year-old to be exposed to what is happening on Instagram and on YouTube, because there is no control over the algorithm. So I go to school, I hear somebody talk about self-harm. I come back and I was like, oh, they were talking about this thing that happened in America somewhere. I go search for it. For the next 1 week, my feed is full with people who are having suicidal thoughts. Now I'm starting to feel like, oh, so much of this is happening. A week later, I'm going to start feeling something about that, right? Eventually, I will talk about it. The more I talk about it, the more it becomes part of my system. I didn't need that information. It was not part of my growing up requirement. So that's where this is at. That even if there is exposure, there will always be exposure. I will go to school, I will meet peer group, I will be influenced by things. But that influence exponentially goes wrong when it is, with the social media. So I need to provide my child with the digital literacy of how to use this if that's a decision I'm making. I need to show by example responsible usage of social media over mindless scrolling. Because if my child is watching me mindlessly scroll, right, then that's
Exactly.
what they're
Yeah.
doing. That's what they're thinking is normal to do. That's how you have your downtime. So that's how I'm going to have my downtime. I've come back after a tired day. I just did tuitions, this, that. I just want to sit and scroll again, right? So educate your child about why they, and don't let rules become, I'm telling you to do this because I'm telling you to do this, right? Keep your phone away because that's what you should do at night. You need to explain to them why you're asking that of them. That's
Because
the time
today-
your brain is growing.
And today's generation demands the why.
Yeah.
We heard our parents as put a rule means put a rule.
Yeah.
And we followed it. But today they question everything you tell them to do. Why? Why do you need me to do it? How do you want me to do it? But give me the result. Why? Does it mean this?
Yeah.
You're absolutely right.
Yeah. So that's why I feel like you need to give them the tools to know how to use something. And that's the accurate example that comes to my mind. I'll never think about handing over my car key to say go. You'll figure it out. Why then am I doing it with this? I feel like it's more dangerous than that, right? Because there's so
Absolutely.
much more exposure and so much more at risk in terms of their development of their thoughts, of their perceptions of the world, of their ideas that that can't be kind of undone. So that's the only advice I'd give to parents. Yeah.
Rashi, tell me before we end this episode, what is the most important factor parents should keep in mind with their teenagers in today's complex world?
I think it's the balance between providing support and helping them become independent. Ashna, there is this pressure parents take upon themselves as if to say that there is some kind of perfect parenting. I have to be the perfect parent. You don't actually, right? Your child is not expecting for you to be a perfect parent. They're just expecting for you to be an attuned parent, available parent. Can't recollect the age of the child, but yeah, around teenage, right? Once tell me that my parent is sitting on the dining table with me, and this was like a confession she was making, right? She said, my parent is sitting on the dining table with me, but is it weird that I feel that my Discord group people are, like more receptive to what I have to say? I feel more heard there because they're not judging me. And it struck a chord for me, right? At the time, I didn't even know what Discord group was. And I was like, what is, and that's how we learn because
Yeah.
there's so much that they're doing that we don't know of. And as a therapist, I feel like I'm also always like growing and learning with these things. But coming back to the conversation, I feel that that's the pressure, right? Parent is feeling I'm sitting and having dinner with my child. I'm here, physically here. You don't have to just physically be there. You also have to be there for them emotionally. Be less judgmental. Let there be more listening, less lecturing, if I may put it like that,
Yeah.
right? So in a very simple analogy, it's like, how you fly a kite and you want your child to fly that kite, you're going to very subtly, very softly, very gently just hold the thread at the back. You're not controlling it yet. You're just holding it for a time when I feel like there is a need to control it. But by and large, you're letting the child take the chances. And that's what you need to also explain to them, that I am going to be standing at the back, right?
Yeah.
Independence does not mean you go figure your life out and you're on your own now, just because everybody says that 15 is the new adulthood and 13 is the, as a parent you have to give them that security,
Safety net.
the safety net,
Yeah.
that the foundation of your relationship becomes that safety net for them. So you are standing there with that rope saying that
No matter
when I
what.
feel like there is a need to control this, I will control it, but otherwise I'm letting you kind of take that leap.
And that security of no matter what, I'm always here.
Yeah.
Them
So
knowing.
giving them that.
Yeah.
Parents feel very confused about this because they feel like, the child doesn't want us. Look at how rebellion they've become. So it's okay, it's fine, I'll just step back. But even when the child is behaving like that, the fact that they know that you are still there, right? You're still showing up for them in a way. You're still giving them that support. It gives them a huge sense of, cushioning. And that's what they need, right? That's all they need, actually. They don't need anything else. They're quite equipped in that sense with many other pieces of information that is available to them in terms of college and trainings and other career aspirations they want to pursue. But this is what they don't have, and this is what nobody else can give them. So that's what parents have to understand, right? That's the critical part to play here. Don't chase the doing all things perfectly for your child. Just try and be there more than you are already.
How can parents identify signs of mental health struggles in their teenagers? Because you're a professional, you would understand. I get to speak to a lot of people in this space, so my awareness is a little more. But how does an everyday parent, address this?
So usually there are subtle changes, and changes would be similar to what we would see of even like adults going through. But when we talk about teenagers, there will be changes in how often or how comfortably they're doing things that they would otherwise do out of interest, right? So maybe a hobby or an interest that they've suddenly dropped out of, or withdrawn communication with friends. Disinterest in academics or sleep disruption is a very, very common pattern. That being said, I'd say don't only look for symptoms. If you feel like there is no symptom, but as a parent you feel like something's off, right?
We have that instinct.
You have that instinct. Everything else is going fine. Please go over and have that conversation, right? And the conversation doesn't have to be, hey, you're not sleeping well nowadays, what's the matter? But it has to be that, I sense something's, happening. You don't have to tell me now, but you should know you can if you want to. Or is something on your mind? Is there something you'd like to talk about? Very open-ended conversation, right? I think that's what is more important. And like we were talking, being emotionally attuned will help you also look for it. So it's not always going to be a symptom. It could be, right? Dietary changes, sleep disruption, sudden withdrawalness, all these things would come up. But sometimes it could be even more silent than that. And that's why if you sense it, you pick it up.
Amazing. Rashi, I just think that this conversation for me is so time relevant, and I think it is the most discussed topic at the moment: teenagers, bullying, mass killing, school shootings. And I hope that people listening and watching can take away the right keynotes that you have so beautifully put out for us.
Thank you so much, Ashna. It's been an absolute pleasure to be part of this conversation. And like last time, I've had a very, very good experience. And I hope that this conversation can reach as many parents and as many teenagers to make even the smallest impact is always something that we're looking at. So thank you.
Thank you.